Politico ran this story, Navy withholding data on UFO sightings, Congressman says. So apparently, a top Republican on the House Homeland Security Committee is accusing the Navy of withholding information about reports of unidentified aircraft after officially requesting more data on the mysterious encounters. So Representative Mark Walker of North Carolina and ranking member of the Intelligence and Counterterrorism Subcommittee asked Secretary Richard V. Spencer in July to outline what resources the Navy is dedicating to investigating the sightings. He also asked if officials have found physical evidence to substantiate the claims and whether they are aware of any foreign nations or private companies that have introduced breakthrough technology that could explain them. But Navy Undersecretary Thomas Maudley responded in a brief letter on July 31st that, quote, the Department of the Navy takes these reports very seriously and continues to log sightings and fully investigate the accounts, end quote. And that is according to a copy provided to Politico. But Walker said that he is discouraged by the Navy's seeming unwillingness to provide his committee with more data about the so-called unidentified aerial phenomenon, the term the Pentagon prefers over the more traditional unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. He has expressed concern publicly that the craft could pose a threat to U.S. forces or territory. So Walker told Politico in a statement, quote, while I'm encouraged, the Undersecretary of the Navy confirmed that UAP, or UFO, encounters are fully investigated, there is frustration with the lack of answers to specific questions about the threat that superior aircraft flying in the United States airspace may pose. And again, that's a direct quote from Walker. He told Politico that in a statement. Navy spokesperson Joe Gradisher responded that the service is prepared to accommodate any further congressional requests for information. He said by email, quote, at this point in time, however, we have not received any new requests for updates on this issue, end quote. Here's something that we talked about in The Day the Earth Stands Still, a book that I wrote with Derek Gilbert. So it says, congressional interest in the unidentified aircraft reports have grown since revelations by Politico and other news outlets in late 2017. That is when our book came out, by the way. That the Pentagon had investigated the sightings through a program established a decade earlier by former Senator Harry Reid of Nevada. Now, that was really interesting because when we wrote the book, we wrote it before this revelation came out, and something that we're going to show you guys in just a minute here, one of the major points of the book was to show through some things that I'll get to in a minute in a clip that I have to show you from around that time, that from an interview that we did, but basically showing that there was going to be something big happening with UFO and official disclosure. Now, the book came out, and right after the book came out, that's when this happened. That's when all of the news broke about the Pentagon's secret interest in UFOs and everything that came out from that. And so Derek and I predicted that in the book. I'm going to show you how we did that in a little bit here. But continuing on, it says, among the revelations were sightings reported by pilots and other personnel assigned to the USS Nimitz and the USS Theodore Roosevelt battle groups in 2004, 2015, and 2016, including footage of unknown aircraft exhibiting characteristics that appear to defy known aerodynamic properties. The Pentagon also financed a series of theoretical studies to try and explain how the aircrafts might operate, ranging from detection and high-resolution tracking of vehicles at hypersonic speed to, get this, and this is a direct quote, warp drive, dark energy, and the manipulation of extra dimensions, end quote. And that's something that we talk about quite a bit in the book, too, is how the way that these objects behave, it does seem like that they're taking advantage of extra dimensions, that they're utilizing some type of extra dimensional technology. So we talk about that quite a bit, and right after the book came out, you can even check the dates on this stuff. Right after the book came out is when all of this stuff broke with the Pentagon, and it was right in the time period where Derek and I said something big was coming. Something big was about to happen with UFO disclosure, and we showed how. We're going to tell you how we found that out in just a minute here. So this stuff this stuff keeps going. Members of Congress on several oversight committees have also sought classified briefings from the Pentagon and research in recent months. This stuff here is going to continue. This is going to continue. It's going to ramp up, and we're going to see more of this in the near future, I believe. I believe that it's ramping up. Also, keep your eyes on Israel. And that was the main thing. We showed in the book, and I'm going to show you a clip from an interview that we did. We show in the book how events happening in the history of Israel, like major events, seem to correspond with events in usually UFOs, but it's a broader topic of what's called cosmic plurality, the idea that there's life on other worlds. In recent years, this has come by way of UFO sightings and reports and things like that. That's what's been getting this idea in the public mind more. But we're seeing that increase like crazy. So we talked about this when our book, Day the Earth Stands Still, came out. And this here, I want to show you a clip. This is how Israel and UFOs connect. So check this out. This is an episode of Into the Multiverse that I did with Derek Gilbert. Watch this. Yeah, so throughout history, there's this odd connection between events in Israel's history and UFO events. We've talked about this on this show a couple of times before. And it seems like when you, and people can go back to the UFO Israel connection 2017 to 2018 episode that we did on this for all the background information. But just as a brief overview of that, if you look at all of the major ones, the big ones, they all have weird anniversaries that seem to point to this time.
Yes.
You know, you have the first Zionist Congress and the Aurora, Texas UFO crash 120 years ago. 100 years ago, you have the Balfour Declaration, and I believe, was it the Fatima? There was some
Fatima,
1917.
Yeah, that was 1917.
Yeah, and then Roswell in 47, 48, because this one you also have the
July of 47 was Roswell, and of course you also had the incidents that just preceded that, of course, with the Kenneth Arnold sighting near Mount Rainier, Maury Island, which was probably a hoax, but involved, and we talk about this, some of the early appearances of guys in the intelligence community who later show up in the JFK assassination investigation, which was really strange. You've got guys there right on the front lines of the very earliest UFO connection with the JFK assassination. But as you point out in the book, the final chapter of The Day the Earth Stands Still, you go through all of these connections, these weird UFO flaps that appear at the same time as major events in Israel's history. And there was a gentleman whose name I was trying to remember. I interviewed him years ago. Barry Chamish. Chamish was the editor of an investigative journal called Inside Israel, and he wrote a book called Return of the Giants, in which he documented the strange connections between UFOs, UFO flaps, and major events in Israeli history.
Oh, wow.
And that work was cited by Chuck Missler in the book Alien Encounters.
Right.
Which was a big influence on me in getting me involved in this research in the first place. So
and Jeffrey Martis has written about it too.
Right, exactly. So this is not something that is new to us in this book, but it is something that others have noticed for a long time. Why? Well, if you look at this as just a manifestation of visitors from other worlds, it doesn't really make any sense. But if you look at it as a supernatural manifestation, if you consider the extra-dimensional hypothesis, which we do, then it makes a lot more sense, because as I argued in my previous book, The Great Inception, all of this spiritual war is about who gets to control the mount of assembly, or the mount of the congregation.
That's right.
Which is where God rules, but where the would-be usurper wants to rule, and it all revolves around Mount Zion in Jerusalem.
Very true.
So
so it makes sense that now, just the dates on some of the bigger ones were curious, because if you look at the end of this year, beginning of next year, there's all these, 20th anniversary, 30th, 40th, 50th, up to 120 anniversaries from this year. So in the book, I speculated. Again, I didn't, but I speculated, I guessed, that, if the pattern continues the way that it seems to be, then we should be seeing something at the end of this year, beginning of next year. We might have at least the beginning of that.
Yes.
So you know more about the actual details between these two events, but we have President Trump declaring that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel.
Yeah.
Which apparently the UN doesn't like very much. And then we have the Pentagon admitting of a secret investigation into UFOs.
This was really strange series of events that have taken place. December of 2017 is really, really turning out to be a wonderfully weird year.
Yeah.
Because on the 6th, that's when Donald Trump made his speech. And since 1995, the United States, the presidents of the United States have been signing 6-month waivers that allowed them to delay fulfilling the obligations under a law passed by Congress back in 95 that declared Jerusalem the capital. It said, no, it didn't declare anything. I mean, really what it said is, we declare that we recognize that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. I mean, Jerusalem has always been the capital of Israel since it reformed, declared independence in May of 1948. The seat of government has always been in Jerusalem. And I admitted this last week when on Sci Friday. I thought Tel Aviv was the capital.
Right.
Because I'm a stupid American and I don't know anything about, what goes on in other nations. But it's because the way our media always talks about what goes on inside Israel. Our embassy has been in Tel Aviv as a political symbol that, we don't want to anger the Arabs and the Palestinians who've been here. There was a big fight back in 47, 48 in the Truman administration over whether or not to even recognize Israel as a nation.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
It was not an easy decision. There were a lot of people inside the Truman administration who were very much against that. And as you point out in the book, of course, major UFO flap over the United States, Roswell, Pacific Northwest, all over the country in 47 and 48. So anyway, what President Trump did was simply recognize the facts on the ground. The Knesset meets in Jerusalem, always has. The Prime Minister lives in Jerusalem, always has. President of Israel, always Jerusalem. So we have just been pretending, playing this game. So that happens on December 6th. Of course, the Middle East, protests all over the place because this symbol now has been removed. Then this past weekend on Saturday, the New York Times reported the existence of a secret, heretofore unknown program within the Department of Defense. Now, we've known about investigations by the Air Force, Project Blue Book, Project Grudge, Call Sign, others that have gone back to the 40s into the UFO phenomenon. The DOD itself, the Pentagon itself kind of delegated that to the Air Force. But between 2007 and 2012, Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, who is now retired, got about $22 million a year put into the Department of Defense budget, the annual Defense Authorization Bill, to investigate reports of unidentified craft. Well, as we point out in the book, most of these craft are probably government projects, whether ours or belonging to other nations. If there's something in the skies over the United States, I really would like the Department of Defense to investigate and find out what the heck it is. So I'm glad they were investigating it. But an intelligence officer with the Defense Intelligence Agency, Luis Elizondo, was tasked. He was interviewed by the Times reporter. He was the one tasked with running this project. And after funding was stopped in 2012, officially, they continued to investigate behind the scenes.
So as you can see, there is something there. And we used that formula, I guess. We used that comparison to predict that something big was about to happen, and it did. And it did. And I think something even bigger is about to happen. My advice is to keep your eyes on Israel. We're seeing a lot of this UFO stuff ramp up, especially in recent months. I think we should keep our eyes on Israel and see what's